God.
I'm chair. This is my last meeting as chair. It all goes well, but. There's a difference among the commission members. So we have a couple of new staff to welcome today. Maya, you wanna? Well, you wanna, oh, what am I supposed to do? Yeah. I can, yeah, the rails are all good. Good. So I'm gonna let Andre. There we go. Thank you. There's the agenda. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, good morning, everyone. We want to welcome a new staff member. We have Britt Beckman over here, who is joining us as a new data grant systems manager. Britt, would you like to share a little bit about yourself and what your role is?
Yeah, sure. So I'm the data and grant systems manager. Right now in my role, I've been doing a lot of kind of turnaround for our AOS and APS reporting. But I'm coming from the library world. Actually, I worked as a librarian for 5 years and I worked with a lot of data there. And I also got my undergrad degree in professional writing with a grant writing focus. So I have a lot of transferable experience and I'm excited to use it in this role.
Welcome.
Also like to welcome Alex Peter, who is our communications governor summer intern, who's joined us from Butler University. Can you share a little bit about yourself, please?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Alex Peters. I'm going to be a senior this year at Butler. I'm majoring in arts administration as well as art and design. And it's been really great joining the team so far.
Yeah, and special point of privilege. Connie, would you like to share some news that we got from Alex?
Yes, I'm so excited to share that Alex has been awarded the Innovation Award through the Governor's Summer Internship Program, one of just a few interns of over 100 that are joining state government this summer. And we've been really lucky to benefit from Alex's expertise and work this summer. So just really happy for this.
And last but not least, joining our team is Andrew Hansen, who's going to be our upcoming community service manager. And would you like to share a little bit of yourself?
Yeah, I'm Andrew Hansen. I hail from Hendricks County, where I've led the Hendricks County Arts Council for the past 3 years. And also I led 2 Main Street organizations in Hendricks County for the past 5 years. So excited to start next week.
Yeah, starting next Monday. So that's the update on the IUISD staff manager.
Great, thank you very much. Next, Daniel's going to share with us a little bit about the 6th Street Arts Alley in Columbus.
Thank you. Very happy to be here in person in Indianapolis for the first time, by the way, and to have solved the great parking crisis. Yeah. In Columbus, we are shutting down streets to cars and welcoming pedestrians instead as a response. But this has been a labor of love, and I just wanted to say it was heartwarming to see Connie come to the opening of this. Myself, my partner, a number of other creatives have been working with the Columbus Area Arts Council since probably about 2019, 2020 on initiatives on 6th Street to do with placemaking, programming, public art as a way of driving urban design and vibrancy in the downtown. So we were able to take on the dreaded parking commission in Columbus, convince them to shut down half of the street as a parklet, and then to install a mural. You can feel free to click on to some of the other slides, but the Arts Council did a wonderful job managing the project. Brooke Hawkins, who's the executive director, as well as Kimber and Anjali, who've been longtime staffers there that I've worked with on a number of occasions. We were inspired a little bit by the conceptual artist Saul LeWitt. Go back to that last slide real quick. And so we were, or this is good. So we had community members sign up. There was about 83 lines in total, and you can sign up to paint one of the lines of the mural, inspired by some of the conceptual instructions that Saul LeWitt developed for his wall drawing series. Which are quite known. So we call this street drawing number 2. And there's going to be events, food trucks, art openings, performances, etc. They have a wonderful slate of events planned for the summer, and hopefully we'll go beyond the 3 months that we were granted to keep the project up and going for the city. So thanks for allowing a little time to share this with the group.
That's great. Thank you. Okay, now some business. Austin, would you call the roll, please?
Absolutely. We will start with our commissioners. We'll start with Aziz Arrington Slocum. Present. Raina Bradley. Here. Chad Bolster. Present. Dave Heiss. Present. Greg Hall.
Present.
Walter Kanabe.
Here.
Daniel Martinez.
Present.
Jake Oakman.
Present.
Ann Valentine.
Here.
Scott Wiley.
Present.
And Lori is not here yet, but she will join us. I will move on to our IIC staff members who are here, starting with Jordan Adams.
Jordan Adams, Artist Services Program Manager.
Eric Ashby.
Eric Ashby, Director of Programs.
Connie Brom.
Connie Brom, Marketing and Communications Director.
Britt Feckman,
Brett Fechtman, Data and Grant Systems Manager.
Maya Michelson,
Maya Michelson, Executive Director.
Stephanie Fender,
Stephanie Fenway, Financial Operations Manager.
Alex Peters,
Alex Peters, Communications Intern.
Gwendolyn Pickett,
Gwendolyn Pickett, Communications Manager.
Andres Anxonera,
Andres Anxonera, Deputy Director and Chief of Staff.
and finally, our folks present via Zoom, that is Kayla Myers.
Kayla Myers, Region 2 Arts Partner.
Madam Chair, that is the current role.
Awesome, thank you. And thank you all for dealing with the parking situation and also the adjustments to when the meeting was gonna happen and the flexibility of the commission. Really appreciate that and certainly want to thank the staff for, it's just been a rough bit of time here. And so just want to mention that before we got started. Okay, the next item of business, the review and approval of the agenda and the minutes from the March 7th, 2025 meeting. These have all been provided ahead of time. Does anyone have any changes or corrections? I will entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Call the roll.
Yes. Azizi,
Aye.
Raina,
Aye.
Chad,
Aye.
Dave, Greg,
Aye.
Walter,
Aye.
Daniel,
Aye.
Jake,
Aye.
and
Aye.
Scott.
Aye. Next up is our consent agenda. I will read through these items. We can take these by consent together. Submitted for commission approval, the fiscal year 26 contract authority delegation. Reports for review, the Arts Trust report, the communications report, staff updates and activity report, lifelong arts report, accessibility grant program update, and the partnerships report. Would any commissioners like to move any of these items for full discussion of the board later in the agenda? Seeing nothing, I will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I move we approve the consent agenda.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Would you call the roll?
Azizi,
Aye.
Raina,
Aye.
Chad,
Aye.
Dave, Greg,
Aye.
Walter,
Aye.
Daniel,
Aye.
Jake,
Aye.
and
Aye.
Scott.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Next up are committee reports. The Committee on the Future. This comes the Andre show.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Starting the meeting of the future report, we're gonna start with the end of fiscal year 25 year-end financial report. The year-end report looks stable and healthy. We want to talk a little bit more about, we have more revenue than we anticipated at the beginning. This is because of a coronavirus relief fund that we received over $285,000 additional to that. That is help the support of the Lifelong Arts Indiana. That's supported in the program. In terms of the expenditures, we have an overage of $200,000. Most of that was part of our federal funding that we utilized for personal changes. As you all know, we have some staff changes with the agency, with the departure of staff, so that staff overage that would utilize staff federal report. Some major changes in point 3, which is contracting. It's included 2 grants that were utilized in point 7. That were allocated as point 3 to utilize the fiscal sponsorship to make it easier for our grantees to access the money and get the procedures done. Other than that, everything was stable. As I mentioned, about $200,000 in overage, and that most of that will be utilized as federal reward. Any questions from commissioners? Hearing none, Madam Chair, this is the item for approval.
Okay. We have the fiscal year 25 year-end financial report. I will entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Azizi,
Aye.
Raina.
Aye.
Chad.
Aye.
Dave.
Aye.
Greg.
Aye.
Walter.
Aye.
Daniel.
Aye.
Jake.
Yes.
And
Aye.
Scott.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. The fiscal year 26 Arts Trust draw requests.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this request comes at the beginning of the fiscal year. What we talked about, we're asking for a $240,000 request from the from the Arts Trust. As a reminder, the Arts Trust is made up of funding from the BNB Arts Trust place on issue. Every license plate that we sold, $25 out of those license plate. Hey, morning.
So thank you to all the commissioners who have a trust.
Yes.
And staff.
And staff.
Including those who newly got their license plate.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. So again, money from that generate revenue that we do for the license plate, we have access to a trust of the interest that is generated from that. So we're making a request for $240,000. The light of that effect is double from what we did last year. Last year we did about $120,000. Addition of that is the reduction of we'll save government money, and the additional two that we're doing 2 rounds of arts project support this year. We're doing one in the fall and one in the spring. So that is a consideration of what we're doing, $240,000 request, and we submit for your consideration. Any questions? Hearing none, Madam Chair, this is also an action item for.
All right. We have before us the fiscal year 26 Arts Trust draw request. I will entertain a motion to approve.
So
Second. We have a motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Azizi.
Aye.
Karina.
Aye.
Chad.
Aye.
Dave.
Aye.
Greg.
Aye.
Walter.
Aye.
Daniel.
Aye.
Jake.
Aye.
Lori.
Aye.
And.
Aye.
And Scott.
Aye.
Just want to say a word about the trust for just a second. We've not taken the opportunity to have Alex share his work. Maybe in the future, get to hear a little bit about it at that committee meeting. But one of Alex's big projects for the summer has been working on Arts Trust promotion. And has got some great plans in place that we're going to be rolling out, or that are rolling out now. And we thank Alex for his work there. In moments like this, having the trust available and having funds to draw to help supplement our current situation is invaluable to us. And so we're going to be leaning in a bit more next few years and probably forever, making folks aware of the Arts Trust and the role it has in funding work across the state. So again, just wanted to highlight that. Thank Alex for his work. And he's come up with some amazingly innovative yet obvious ways to be promoting the trust that we've not been doing to this point. So.
I think expect nothing less from a Butler. student.
Yes. Wanted to make sure that I touched.
Wonderful, thank you. Okay, fun times, fiscal year 26 budget approval.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we're gonna begin with an outlook of what is State Budget 101. So as you all know, the state runs on a July 1 to June 30 fiscal year. In the fall of an even year, the ISC submits our proposed biennial budget to the governor's office for review. And then at the beginning of an odd year, which was this year, the Indiana General Assembly reviews and considers the proposed budget from the governor. Around April of that session, the budget is approved by General Assembly, and that becomes a foundation for our agency's biennial budget. There are 9 accounting categories for our budget, including point 1, which is personnel services and fringe. And so that is everything that is staff paychecks, health insurance, benefits, etc. Point 2 is our utilities, things like subscriptions, cell phone services, and IT services. Point 3, professional services and contracts. Point 4, supplies and materials. Point 5, AV equipment and capital assets. So that is AV equipment, IT accessories. Now, point 6 and point 8, we don't utilize in the agency. That is distribution for funds for local government units. We don't do that. And then direct, indirect support, so SNAP, child welfare, and rent assistance, we also don't do that. Bread and butter of our agency, as you all know, is grants. So that's individual artists and organization, that is point 7. And last but not least is point 9, administrative service expenses. So that includes services that we pay to state personnel office, IoT, mileage, travel, registration, reimbursements, etc. On the other side, we also receive funding from the federal government. The federal government runs on October 1st to September 30th fiscal year. We as an agency receive funding from the National Endowment for the Arts. Every year, we submit our proposed application to the NEA of September. Traditionally, we hear from the NEA on the award notification in April, but here we are in July. So we got a letter of notification in June, and that's what hold up the process of this meeting. Traditionally, we would have this meeting for 12 August in June. Not having that allocation, not having that information on what we want to know and what our budget is going to be, for hinder us from understanding what our budget is going to be for the next fiscal year. So that's what we're here today. We also then work with the state budget agency in setting up the proper accounting and tracking to make sure that we have the reporting processes in place for the federal government. So let's take a look at fiscal year 26. The state appropriation from the governor's office in the General Assembly was approved at a 33% reduction of the budget that we had last year. That's about $1.72 million in our overall agency. In addition to that, for those who are following the news and everything that's happening, there was also a 5% management reserve holdback across all state agencies to make sure that we're keeping our reserves for the state government. So you did the math over there, we're at 38% reduction from last year. That's stateside. On the federal appropriations side from the National Endowment for the Arts, we did see a almost 10% increase from last year from the National Endowment for the Arts. However, that is two one-time components. One of them is Arts and Health, and the second one is American 250, which is celebrating the United States sesquicentennial. I do want to allude to that this is just for fiscal year 26. Federal fiscal year 26, which is the federal government, as I mentioned, starts this October. We have no idea what that allocation is going to be, so I want to keep that in mind when we're making determinations for the audience of what, for instance, AOS supports look like next year. Questions so far before we go at a revenue at a glance?
Just for some context, what has been proposed for the NEH and the NEA for federal fiscal year 26 reflects at present a 35% reduction for the agency. So we'll be following that process very closely. Obviously, it doesn't impact this year's budget situation, but obviously, as those of you who may have been paying attention to federal cultural agency funding, we're in uncertain times. And so we're monitoring that very carefully, and we will be sure to let grantees know for whom their awards have federal funds that the second year of a two-year funding cycle. So I'm just putting that out there. We are optimistic. You're optimistic people. We will continue to be. Nobody's gonna knock us off our positive thinking, but just FYI, want folks to have that sort of touching into the second year of this.
That's a quick question about the NEA, these one time, what is the arts and health?
Actually, Eric's gonna talk a little bit about that when we talk about arts organizations before. Oh, yeah, thank you.
Any additional questions? Okay, so this is the revenue at a glance. As I mentioned previously, we have on the blue is the full revenue that we received from both the state and federal government. And the green column shows that, but with the 5% reserve that we have to hold for the organization. So it brings us about an annual budget of $4.8 million. Where is that going to be in terms of the expenses? So again, we want to make sure that we're using our personnel. We want to make sure that we're also supporting and maintaining our core grant programs, which are our organization support and our project support. And then we want to make sure that we're also continue to invest in target opportunities such as artist services and community services as well. So over the next slides, we're going to see fortunately a lot of red. This is what it looks like in terms from the blue column, which is fiscal year 25, and the green column, fiscal year 26. And then the black column shows you the variance of what we are reduced. So we're looking at reduction in personnel salary. And that is due to a position that is being held temporarily right now at the moment, which is our arts educations and accessibility services. Same thing with 0.2 in utilities, some reduction there for not having that individual using phone services. Okay, 0.3, a reduction on professional services as well. It's the list of all the professional services. 0.4 and 0.5, some reduction as well as some areas, mostly on supplies and also support for conferences. 0.7, this is the biggest area, again, like I mentioned previously, a bread and butter for the agency. So this is the reduction that we have for most of the program. The items that you see in black, those are the two federal programs that I mentioned earlier. So it's the Arts and Health support and then the American 250. So that's why those are in black. And last but not least, administrative and operating costs. Again, reductions across the board. And next slide is an overview of expenditures at a glance. Again, looking at that 33% reduction, 38% reduction, sorry. What's next for us? So fiscal year began July 1, and still to this day, we're still waiting for the NEA award letter, which is coming at the end of the month now. As soon as we have that letter, then we can start processing and start building all the requisitions and purchase orders to start doing all our federal work. So until that works, so in a holding pattern, trying to do as much as we can with individual projects that do not require federal funding. We can start building those in, so mostly APS. But as soon as we have that available, then we'll be able to start issuing contracts to able to do all of that. So questions so far about the fiscal year 26 budget? Hearing none, Madam Chair, this is for approval.
Okay, I just, again, want to compliment the staff. This is not what we've done for the last few years, and the uncertainty throughout the process is challenging to navigate, and I'm grateful that you are an optimistic team of people who came with solutions rather than simply focusing on the problem at hand. I mean, certainly we have it's not the problem at hand. But I don't know that all of the commissioners get to see what Dave and I see when we did a little more regular meetings with Maya and the team. So it is tough. These are tough decisions that had to be made based on things outside of our control. And so I just want to really compliment Andre and the team and the thoughtful consideration of how to address these things. So I didn't want to have a motion yet until we made note of that. So having said that, as chair, I will entertain a motion to approve the fiscal year 26 budget.
So. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Yes, Azizi.
Aye.
Rana.
Aye.
Chad.
Aye.
Dave. Aye. Greg.
Aye.
Walter.
Aye.
Daniel.
Aye.
Lori.
Aye.
Jake.
Aye.
Ann.
Aye.
Scott.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, wrapping up the Andre show and moving on to the Eric show. I'll just, it's the last meeting as chair, presumably, and I just, I'm just gonna take some personal privilege here throughout this. I know, just as with the budget, and this impacts how we are able to grant as an organization. But I hope we can today focus on the fact that we do still have funding to do this kind of programming and impact in our communities throughout the state. And I don't want us to lose sight of that. I think, again, lots of tough decisions, but the team has really been thoughtful about that. And it is really what a great thing we get to do to use taxpayer dollars to support our communities in this way. And so with that, I will turn it over to Eric to talk about fiscal year 26-27 Arts organization support.
Hey, thank you very much, Madam Chair. We're gonna tag team this with Britt. She's gonna talk a little bit about the applications and I'll talk about the funding recommendations. So you won't have to hear me talk for terribly long. So just a review of what the Art Organization Support Program is. It is general operating support for art organizations across the state. And the main focus is to provide consistent and stable funding to art organizations to do their work and provide access to arts experiences and support quality of life and community across the state. So that's what this program is here to do. A couple of the changes that we implemented ahead of this application cycle, as a reminder, one, the criteria language was updated and the scoring range was also updated. This program used to have a really big scoring range of 0 to 25 points in certain sections that could be pretty confusing for reviewers. And so we condensed some of the scoring and streamlined some of the criteria. And of course, the application questions were also updated to reflect those criteria changes. And then applicants were not required to provide programming year round. So that used to be a requirement in this program, and that was removed. And additionally, we did not have live panel review meetings that were live streamed. There were panel meetings that occurred, but you had to tune in for when they happened. So just a quick review of the applicants, but just in aggregate, and then I'll hand it over to Brett to take it from here. We had 273 applicants in the program, and Brett will talk a little bit about how this compares to previous years. This is inclusive of the regional arts partner applications as well. There are 31 new applicants, and we reached 56 counties, different counties had applications, which was a little 61% of Indiana counties, and we had 50 rural applicants, which is about 18% of the applicant pool. So continue to see growth in applications for this program, but I'll say a little bit more about what that looks like specifically. This. Yep.
Okay, so for the AOS applicants for this year, we had 273. Comparing to fiscal year 24 and 25, we had 259, and in fiscal year 23, we had 237. Now, one thing that Eric did not mention, so fiscal year 24 and 25 was the first year, I believe, that we did the 2-year cycle versus the 1-year cycle for organization support. And we also changed the tier levels. It used to be $50,000 or more that organizations had to make in order to qualify. We've now moved that down to $20,000. So that may explain some of the increase in applicants last year, but we're still seeing a really steady increase. Now that would also possibly explain why we have fewer new applicants for AOS this year versus last year. Because since last year was the first year that more applicants were eligible to apply, we obviously saw a larger increase there. We're still pretty steady. I mean, 31 compared to 17 new AOS applicants in 22 to 23 is. Okay, this is our county map for AOS applicants just for the fiscal year 26. So we have the 56 total counties applied represented, with obviously the largest amount of applicants being from Marion County, that really dark color there in the center. And we have a lot of applicants as well in our larger regions that we would usually expect to see more applicants in those regions, especially for organization support. And what we have there in the lighter colors are just going to be fewer applicants by county represented. So for our AOS applicants, we have a lot of different institution types that applied. The institution types are determined by the NEA and they are not defined. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So organizations would just select what they thought that their organization aligned with. So the statement may not be fully accurate for a representation of what institution types are really applying. But as you can see, we have a lot of arts service organizations there, which that's the biggest one that we kind of question. We have a feeling that some of those might be more performing arts or other services that, you know, they are providing, they're providing arts, but it's not really arts. Any questions about that data? Okay. Primary discipline type, also just an NEA discipline type that is not defined. We have a huge amount of our applicants in music and theater. Many selected multidisciplinary, visual arts, dance, etc. And again, I just chose the top 10.
Are we considering poetry part of literature, or is it not included?
It's in literature, I believe. I don't think the NEA spells it out as a separate category. But the NEA also supports poetry specifically as a separate piece of our federal grant award agreement, which I guess I should note that is a piece of our NEA award that we received notice of this year, Poetry Out Loud, which is managed by Indiana Humanities, which is a statewide poetry competition for high school students.
Great. Okay, and then as I was explaining earlier, our tier amounts start at $20,000 for annual budget for organization support. And then they go well above 1.59 mil. And this is what that breakdown looks like, which I have it spelled out percentage wise in a slide following this. But as you can see, a huge number of the applicants applying for our organization support are in those lower budget tiers. So there is a huge impact in being able to support those organizations, especially between $20,000 to $86,000 annual budget. Oh, sorry. Okay, so
just like that breakdown, you can see the percentage of applicants, and this is just applicants, not who necessarily got funded by this. But 25% of our applicants are in that tier A group. Now, what I really want to draw your attention to with this slide is what staffing looks like for those smaller organizations. So in an organization that only has an annual budget of $20,000 to $86,000, they're probably not having a full-time staff member. So they're operating on mostly part-time and volunteer staff. And we see that reflected as well in our 24.5% of applicants in tier B. A larger amount of annual budget, but they still might not have a full-time staff member. They're relying on that part-time and volunteer staff to really run their organization. Now, tier C, we're seeing maybe they have one, obviously not half of the staff member, but we thought that the data was still relevant to show you're still relying on probably one, maybe two full-time staff members to support that organization, and still quite a bit of part-time and volunteer staff. And then going down into tier D, we finally have more full-time staff members, still a lot of part-time staff support, maybe less volunteer staff support. And then tier E, finally having a more well-rounded full-time and part-time staff to support their organization. That's all from me on this one.
Thank you, Brett. And I just want to give her kudos. You know, she hopped in the middle of all this and has state government's complicated and particularly complicated. She's had to step in the middle of a very different cycle. So it's been quite the first couple of months. So I want to give her a shout out for all the work she's put in to learn all the things and for success and be able to talk about these programs. It's really wonderful and appreciate having her on board. So I'm going to dive into the funding recommendations themselves. You have these in your packets. I will note that one of the highlights green for new applicants didn't all show up in the packet itself, but in the column you can see there was a new applicant in the AOS program for this year. So want to start a little bit with how things have changed from previous years. The last 2-year cycle for AOS, the commission approved 2.64 million for the program. This year, we're proposing 2 million to support the program. This is inclusive of the regional arts partner applications. The applicants from the last 2-year cycle were 259 and this year is 273. And as a reminder, the funding source for this program comes from 3 categories. NEA funds, direct federal funds, our state match dollars. So we get a bucket of money from the NEA and we have to reserve a 1-to-1 match, our state appropriation. And then additional money we overmatch on top of that from our state appropriation. Because our state appropriation is larger than our NEA award. So that's where that's how the program is supported. Here are those budget tiers that Britt mentioned earlier. This program is funded based on budget tier, and I want to make that delineation. We do have Indiana Arts Commission regions that manage the application process and the administration of the program, but the funding model is based on these budget tiers. And these tiers adjust slightly each year depending on financial statements that are submitted at time of application. So I want to review what we did in 24-25, just so you have a reference point for how that worked. You can see there across the top the percent of applications funded by tier. So you can see it got more competitive among the larger organizations. And we were able to fund 207 of the 251 applicants. So it was about an 82% funded. And we reached 48 counties with 37 new grantees. So this want to give you a grounding in where we were last year. And one of the key changes that we made in the program with the 24-25 cycle was around this concept of meaningful award and what does that mean in the program. So that orange line you see there is how we used to do AOS awards. So this is by budget tier. And so you can see the awards for A, B, and C are pretty low. And then we start to see a steep incline in the award amount as we get to the bigger budget organizations. So comparatively, where most of the arts organizations are in the state between A and C, they were not getting very meaningful awards and we're giving a disproportionate amount of the money to larger budget organizations. And so we wanted to still give meaningful awards across the board, but create more parity among organization size for the amount of money that was getting. So that blue line is what we did last year. You can see it's a much more smooth slope and it has much more parity across the budget tiers. So with the funding recommendations in front of you, there are a couple of things. We went through a number of scenarios with the Programs, Grants and Services Committee and the Executive Committee to have a discussion about how to approach funding this program, given some of the budget constraints we had, and wanting to also make sure we stay committed to some of the core elements of what this program is and what it means. And so at the core of a lot of the discussions around the scenarios was a balancing act of, do you fund more organizations with a lower dollar award, or do you fund less organizations with a higher dollar? That's sort of what a lot of the conversation boiled down to. And so where we landed was a sort of in a middle ground place, which was prioritizing keeping the percent of applicants funded in the program fairly consistent and stable to previous years, while also trying to make sure that the average award in each budget year did not increase by more than 30%. Keeping in mind our budget reduction is 38% with the holdout. We didn't want to exceed 30 and an average award. We didn't want to exceed 30% decrease in an average award per budget. So that was the approach we took to arts organization support. And so here's what the results looked like for that. Funding 231 of the 273 applicants, had about 43 rural grantees, reached 52 counties, which is an increase of 4 counties over the previous AOS cycle, and 27 new AOS grantees in the program. So you see 84% funded, so it's a little higher percentage funded than last year. We have more applicants than last year. And so while there was a decrease in award, we were able to get more reach in the program. Here are what some of those things look like. You can see we did fund at a little bit higher percentage in some of the larger tiers compared to last year. And then you can see those average changes in award by tier. That first column there is what the averages for this year versus last year. And you can see nobody's really getting much over 30% decrease per tier. Any questions so far? Okay. All right, so this is a graph showing the average award across the entire pool. So as you can see, this is a little bit lower comparatively, just average award, all of the awards averaged together than in previous fiscal years. And that is a reflection of the decision we made to fund a little bit more organizations and lower those awards. Okay, so some of the key impacts I just want to call your attention to before we actually sort of get into the actual action itself. 4 additional counties funded in this model that we weren't reaching last year in the program. Funded 24 more applicants in the program this year than last year. And the goal in a lot of those as well is to maintain stability across the field. Of course, there's a lot of uncertainty in the funding environment, and it's even more competitive in other places like community foundations and other forms of local support that are also receiving increased pressure from other sectors as federal funding changes in fields outside of the arts. So we wanted to provide some sense of stability to the extent possible through the AOS program this year. And the other piece to keep in mind is that organizations that are not funded in the Arts Organization Support Program are eligible for the project support program. Your offering twice, and as we'll talk about later, also has significantly less money in it than before. And so the more organizations that do not get funded in arts organization support, the more organizations that apply on our private support, where we also don't have a lot of resources to support that program. And that program is also there to support organizations beyond just arts organizations as well. So trying to, have these 2 programs work in tandem as well. So those are all some of the considerations and impacts from the recommendations you see in front of you. So here's where we have the specific organizations recommended for funding in the AOS program, and they're all grouped by tier. So I'm going to walk through these slides by tier and pause at each one for any questions. And I think, Anne, would you like to do one motion at the very end for the entire? Okay.
Yes. And just to level set for all of us, we do this once a year, or in this case, we now do it every 2 years. This isn't an opportunity to debate the merits of specific grant recommendations here. So just know we're looking at it holistically and seeing the results of all of the input and data from the grant process.
And I will note, this is a 2-year program. And so we will approve these now, and then we'll, at this meeting, hopefully in June next year, we'll come back to you again with a set of approvals, because that next year will be dependent on the next year's NEA award. And so depending on what that looks like, some of these recommendations may end up changing in year 2. But that's a little out of our control at the moment. And we will communicate with applicants and grantees around that situation. With that being said, here are tier A recommended for funding, and that's really small, but they're all in your packet.
Yeah, we do all have a packet, just like this section here, if you wanted to be able to read.
I need your list of recommended applicants. And the ones on the screen have the highlights in green for the new applicants. Like I said, those highlights didn't all translate into your packets. Okay. On tier A. Here's tier B, this is 86,117,000. Tier B. Questions? Tier C, 217,689,000. There is tier D, 689 to 1.59 million. And here is tier D, over 1.59 million. This is the recommended pool of applicants for your consideration.
Okay, commissioners, we've had time to review this information. I will entertain a motion to approve the fiscal year 26-27 AOS program grant awards.
So moved. Second.
Get a motion in a second, please call the roll.
Absolutely. Azizi.
Aye.
Raina.
Aye.
Chad.
Aye.
Dave.
Aye.
Greg.
Aye.
Walter.
Aye.
Daniel.
Aye.
Lori.
Aye.
Jake.
Aye.
Ann.
Aye.
Scott.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. We will go ahead and we'll give you a pause and take our mid-meeting break for a few moments.
Okay.
Then.
Yes. That means 15 for Chad, but.
Right at the top of the hour, we will reconvene. We'll pause for 10 minutes. Thank you.
That's awesome.
Yes.
Or a different color.
Are you gonna tell me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought, well,
I sort of.
we thought it'd be fun to have a make it and take it, so we're gonna make something and then please.
Pick something, we're not we keep it yet,
Yes.
we're gonna,
Yes.
Greg is
Okay.
inviting us in to create something.
Take art.
Good. Sorry. Yes. And we have a video that will also be just to help a little bit. And see it, but, well, if you can take your square piece of origami paper and rotate it so it's a diamond shape. First thing we're gonna do is rotate the bottom point up to the top. We'll make that a line. We can go ahead and start the video. And once you get that aligned, go ahead and crease the seam. It's always good to, again, and drag your nail across it just to really bed it. Bottom to top. That's okay, you can keep going. After you've done that, and after you've creased it, you'll go ahead and open it. And then you're gonna rotate it 90 degrees, so. Actually, I'm sorry, we're gonna rotate it so that we're making another diamond. So, yes. Well, line those up and then crease that as well. It is really helpful if you can put an extra bit of pressure on that seam. That's okay. I'm not doing it right, but I think my friend. Find the scribbles. So after you've done the second one, go ahead and open it, and then we're going to turn it upside down. Important step. And we want it to be faced like a square. And we'll bring the bottom edge of the square up to the top edge. So again, after you've made this form, we'll open it, turn it upside down, and then we'll take the bottom edge to the top edge.
Why don't we make?
Well, I can tell you, or yes, but, okay, well, no, this is an origami butterfly.
Greg, you said you should think about getting into education.
Okay, then after you've creased that, go ahead and open it again. And then rotate it 90 degrees.
Wow.
The new bottom edge up to the top edge.
The seam like that, so, yeah, that worked.
Yes.
All right.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Was able to get all four of those steps in? Okay, go ahead and open that. Now, if we push up to the center, it'll begin to fade into these different areas.
Yes.
That was on the screen or not, but, you can kind of squeeze them together and them to be basically these four different lines, so.
Okay, one of those extra things.
Very good.
Oh, wait.
Okay. Yeah.
Wait,
For our next step, we're gonna make it a triangle. Bring this together. I usually just put a little pressure on them so they behave, lay down, so they behave.
Oh, yeah, we don't behave.
Before we move on, anyone, hands, anybody?
All right, wait a second.
Yeah, so go ahead and.
Yeah.
There was just triangle.
On a rise.
I wear that hat every night.
Hold it up that way.
I may have done a crazy crease.
See what we can do. Triangle.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm winging.
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay. All right, if you'd like to do that, I can change.
Yeah.
No, but.
Have this.
Wow.
There.
I was an innie, not an outie.
Got it, yes. Anyone else need help?
I was an innie, not an outie.
Then I'm gonna take one of the two wings, pull it up.
Okay.
Angle down and grab this edge. And see this maybe on the screen, but we're gonna lay it down, but not so that it lines up exactly with this point. We're gonna have it actually stick out to the side just a little bit.
See, this is where it goes. Yeah. This is where we separate the.
An equalizer. Yeah, we want it to
Same angles.
So can you see that okay? Maybe $1 to finish. Now, again, taking one of these two things and
Pointing up. Uh-huh.
bring it up here and
The other way around.
next to the top points.
But like this, right? Like this, yeah.
One side,
But a little bit off.
a little bit off one of these edges and rolling it up.
Yeah.
Yes. That makes sense?
Yeah, that's
I have a question? Yes. Okay.
And just me got to science.
That's where my cat, yes.
A little bit off.
So once you get that traction to the side, go ahead and crease them.
We doing the other side?
And then you're gonna grab the
Yeah.
the other side, and you're gonna do the same thing.
I wait, because the second I assume I'm wrong. Yep.
Pull it up, get to the other side, and has that same sort of. Have a balance. That makes sense. Okay.
I've been listening.
Very good, and then crease that.
No, this is one top, one.
All right, working. Good.
Yes.
Our last
cattail?
So these are the two sides we just folded up. If we reach behind them, pull this point, we're gonna take it away from this, so pull that down.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Pull that down.
Pull it down,
Yes.
hold it down.
And we're gonna have that just peek over the top, so.
Okay.
Yes. So, again, on the back, gonna pull that down. So,
To the bottom?
and it actually goes just past the bottom, so if that helps, we're gonna have it just poking below the bottom. If that makes sense. But again, we're gonna take this other point, pull it down past the bottom. We're not creasing things, we're just pulling it down. Could have mentioned that before. We're going to take off.
I creased the shit out of mine.
Exactly. Cross that.
Mine's gonna stay a caterpillar, I think.
Okay.
I gotta fully
Then, once you have that pulled together, we'll go ahead and
metamorphosize, is that? Horses, yeah.
put them this way, have them bite, just sort of snug them down, and then you have your, you have your butterfly, so. Walk around and help you wrap those up if you like.
Yeah.
I'll be right around. Yes.
Yeah.
Is that the? This is
I don't know.
definitely.
Awesome, thanks.
Greg.
Hope you like this. If you'd like some more copy paper too.
Try again.
Can we find the video on TikTok?
I just.
There we go.
Yeah.
This is the kind of content you don't get at other government commissions. All right, are we ready to get rolling?
Yes.
We will resume with the fiscal year 26 arts project support spring cycle.
All right.
Eric can take it over.
Just to put a bow on what we did with operating support there, the funding notification for those, that we just recommended will go out September 1. As Andre mentioned, we're still waiting for the official award letter from the National Endowment for the Arts, which is what allows us to move forward into the next steps for that process. So that is a little bit, much later than normal. So hopefully September 1, it will be the day, but that's what we've got penciled.
We've communicated that to the potential grantees.
Yes.
Perfect.
All right, so here is FY 26 spring arts project support. And I say spring because there's also a fall arts project support. So this is part one of two for this fiscal year. Okay, so just a quick reminder on what this program is. This is a project grant program where applicants can request up to $4,000 to support public facing arts activities. The eligibility for this program is very wide. Could be any nonprofit, schools, units of local government, fiscally sponsored applicants, 501(c)(6)s as well, are eligible in this program. And the main goal of our project support is access to art experiences across the state. So this is really about broad access to arts experiences. All right, so reviewing some of the key changes that were made, similar to our organization support criteria language was also updated in this program, as well as the scoring range was moved to 1 to 4. This would be a much higher scoring range. And so the application questions were also updated to reflect that as well. There was a requirement for colleges and universities that was new, and I'll talk about the impact of that on the applicant here next, but colleges and universities were required to have a project that either was pre-K to 12 art education, or their project took place in a high priority geographic service county for the Arts Commission. And then the other change was 501(c)(6) tourism entities and chambers of commerce were eligible to apply. We really didn't see many of those come into the pool in this sector. There were some tourism entities, but they weren't C6s, they were C3s. Tourism entities can kind of be either C6s or C3, it kind of depends on. We've also eliminated the live panel review. We still had external reviewers, but they reviewed it all asynchronously. We did not convene a panel. And then, of course, the addition of a second cycle is new for years. Or historically been only offered once. So if you missed the deadline, you couldn't reapply again until the fall. Okay, so with that being said, here's what some of the applicants look like. I'll talk through this and then Brett will say a little bit more about the applicant pool and our project support. And again, reminder, this is just the first cycle. So we've got 265 applications in this first round. 53 were new applicants. 70 counties applied, which is wonderful to see. 76% of Indiana counties applied in the program. And we had a number of rural applicants, 32% of the applicants were rural, about around 20% of the state is rural. So it's great to see that representation. The average project budget is about $19,000. We'll talk about how applicants matched the IAC investment later on, but it's something to note. The average project is around $19,000 in this program. And there were only 8 college and university applicants this year, which is the noted decline from last fiscal year. So we implemented those new requirements around the content of the projects for colleges and universities, and we did see a decline in those applications. And like I mentioned earlier, no substantive change based on the 501(c)(6) eligibility rule change. Nothing much to report there. So I'll hand it over to Britt to talk a little bit more about the application.
Okay, so similarly to our AOS, in Spike County, I made a map here and I compared this one to last year's. We didn't have a similar map for AOS because we haven't done it for 2 years. So here we have those 70 counties applied represented, and again, you can see a substantial amount of applicants in the major population counties that we would accept. And it was 71 counties applied this year. Last year we had 71 counties applied. However, again, this is just our spring cycle. So we will have a fall cycle, which they'll apply for in the spring. And so we may see more counties represented there. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm going. I'm just clicking. Okay, so here I wanted you to see the combined. With AOS and APF applicants thus far, we have reached 8 out of our 15 every county funded targeted goals. So that's really great to see them represented here in these other applicant pools. And then in total between AOS and APS combined, 81 out of our 92 total counties were represented in the applicant.
Nice work. Good job.
Hard to do with a lot less grants.
So, APS applicants history. Again, we've only got the spring applications so far, but even though it's down from last year's total applicant pool in APS, we still see an increase in applicants compared to previous fiscal years for the entire APS program. And then here I wanted to show you our applicants by budget. So, we have a huge range of applicants for the APS. And, sorry, I can't really see it. I just wanted to note that the public education organizations and some of our other public organizations like libraries were not required to put budget size here, so their budgets would not be represented here. So this is not a full amount of budgets represented across, but just so that you can see what a wide range we have and how many applicants we have in the 0 to 5,000 range is pretty high. And they're in those mid ranges between $10,000 to $100,000 budget. Any questions?
I'll just add one note on this. A lot of smaller budget organizations apply in the Arts Project Support Program, but then you can also see at the very end, there's also a pretty high number of large organizations that also apply in the program. So just something to note, the dispersion there, a lot of small and a lot of really big and not as much in the middle. You can see a dip through sort of what we consider mid-sized organizations.
And again, if they apply in this spring cycle and they do not get awarded, they can apply in the fall cycle. Yes.
Did you guys get any sense that the reason why we had those large was people not being funded in AOS? Coming over to APS to apply for a grant?
We'll see that play out in the next cycle of project support. So those 40 some odd that weren't recommended in arts organizations for this cycle will be eligible for project support that'll open on September 1st. So we'll see how many come over. When this happened last year, in the FY25 cycle, we had maybe 20 or so AOS not funded that ended up applying for project support in FY25. But we also provided a separate grant program for some of the not funded organization support. So numbers were a little skewed. So we'll see when we talk in December, and we'll have the numbers on who matriculated over.
Yeah, and my kind of assumption without really looking closely at those organizations would also be that some of those larger organizations may not have had arts as their main organization support, so they wouldn't have been eligible for AOS, but they would be eligible to apply here in APS. Okay, so organization type. Again, this is NEA language that the applicants self-selected. So data could be a little bit skewed here, but most of the organizations that applied here for APS support are nonprofit. And again, I wanted to just show you the institution types, keeping in mind that they are self-selected, so we might see some skewed data here, but it is really interesting to see. We have a wider range of applicants between institution types versus what we had in AOS. More libraries, but they weren't eligible for AOS. That's all for me.
Very much. So I'm going to talk through the funding recommendations for the program. And just a review of how this worked last year, what we went through last year. The funding formula for this program worked where the top 3 eligible organizations in each county that apply were funded. And after we made it through that, it was competitive among the remainder of it. At that time, the budget for APS last year was over $880,000. And this year, the total budget for the program is a little over $600,000. And so the funding code had to change a little bit. And we did fund 227 organizations over the whole cycle last year. But again, only one cycle of APS last year. And so you can see the percentage of APS that were recommended for funding. The program continues to become more and more popular, and we continue to see increases in applications that are not commensurate with the way the budget has been going. And so that percentage funded is going to continue to decline over the next couple of fiscal years in this. Okay, so here's the approach that was used for FY 26 APS this year. With a $437,000 available for this first cycle. We took the approach of funding the top 2 scoring eligible applicants in every county that applied. And then we also eliminated a score threshold for eligibility, which allowed some of the more rural applicants that we maybe see in more of the community side of the work that already had a project ready to go and implement, could be supported in this program. And that's part of why you see the county reach continuing to increase. So we're seeing more applicants from really rural counties in this program as well, which is good to see. And then as a reminder for the funding source of this program, this is state appropriation dollars. This is our state general fund that came from General Assembly. There is not federal funding in the Art Project Support Program. And then the additional money that goes into this program is what Andre referenced earlier with the Cultural Trust. That draw we use to help supplement some of the arts projects that are in there. And so with this funding approach, we're able to fund 116 out of the 265 applicants, which is only 44% funded, which is significantly lower than historically. But again, needing to budget for 2 cycles with an already reduced full budget allocation for this program is where we landed this year. We do see 70 counties funded, a high percentage of this grant program, again, thinking about the main thrust of this program is about accessible arts opportunities. We did see 50% of the grantee pool from rural counties. And there were a number of first-time APS grantees in the pool as well, 35, which is 30% of grantees. Any questions on the approach to the program? This is a tough one. There are a lot of great projects that were not funded that applied. And so this is hard.
I will just say, I think I appreciate that we've kept the recommendations have kept the priorities that we wanted to see. And it's the result of the planning that's been done over the past few years to prioritize broadening who could be eligible for this, and also efforts to incorporate a lot more communities than have been supported by the Arts Commission in the past. So I know it's hard, we aren't able to fund as many and as certainly as a percentage of applicants, but it's still focusing on those top priorities, and you're seeing the results of that. So thank you for that.
Yep, trying to keep that consistency, and among those projects that are funded, there's a lot of great work happening in both of these programs that will continue to happen and that we'll be able to support. And I'll talk a little bit later about some of the other things we're thinking about in regards to supporting some of the demand for some of the programs and things that organizations and communities already have going on. So I want to talk a little bit about sort of what was the budgets in this program a little bit further, because I think this is an important aspect of the Art Project Support Program to be aware of. So the total project funding that was requested in the program among all the applicants was a little over $1 million. So that was, if we were to fund everyone who applied, that would be the amount we need. And I will note that among the applicant pool, if we were to fund everyone at the full request amount, they'd be leveraging our fund, they'd be matching our fund at a 5-to-1 rate. So the total amount of income in all the project budgets was over $5 million. So it's important to understand that in project support programs like this, while there isn't a match that's required, a lot of communities and organizations will leverage public funds to seek support from other sources. And you see that play out in the project budgets that we saw. So even among what was recommended for funding in your packets, with a $437,000 investment from the IAC, people are turning around and leveraging over $2 million in other support for their projects. So it's a really important piece that can catalyze additional investment in the arts, especially at a time when institutional funding for arts projects is certainly stretched. Wow, okay, I'll go back. Where was it? Next. So a couple things I want to note about the considerations that went into funding the program in this way. One is, again, prioritizing access, which is at the core of what this program is about. Another piece is reaching counties that are high priority counties for ISC's communities programming. The Every County Funded program, which is specifically around rural communities, and Creative Convergence also focuses on communities. There were applicants in this program that are typically in some of those types of programming, and so since we already have projects happening and things planned, that is what we want to see from those programs, and so wanted to prioritize getting them support for the things that they already had in motion. Additionally, we kept $200,000 in reserve for that second cycle of APS. So we're unsure what the demand is going to look like in that second cycle. Again, that opens September 1, closes September 30th. We've never done it twice. I'm not sure if there's going to be 50 applicants or another 200 applicants. So it's a little bit of a crapshoot in terms of how to budget for 2 cycles this year with the way things have planned out, but that is how we've decided to manage it this first time around, and of course, we'll learn and adapt for future years. So here are some of the types of activities. You can see the count of, and I just included the kind of top ones. There were some that only had like 1 application, so these were the main ones. And you can see the count of applied versus the count recommended. And they pretty much mirror all the way down, but I want to call your attention to a couple of things. That first line is arts instruction. There's a lot of arts education projects that are in this program. That's historically what we've seen as a piece of this program. There are a number of school corporations, K-12 organizations, or community centers that are in this program. So a lot of types of activities tend to be around arts instruction. And then of course, we see a lot of just performances and fairs and festivals. So that's at the heart of a lot of what these projects are, and that's where we see the most applications. And there's also a good bit of public art, and that happens in this program as well. A lot of murals and things of that nature that are supported. Okay, so we're going to move into the grant team.
Let's say just one thing, back, if you would go back to the previous slide for just a second. One of the things that we're beginning to look at as it relates to arts project support, again, is the number of school corporations that are applying for funds for this program, for arts education activities, in their schools for their students. And, there's always been a tension point around our support of what should be curricular responsibilities at the local school corporation level versus students not having access to those if we do fund them. So that's going to be an area that we're going to be looking at probably over the next year and kind of determine, do we make changes? If not, how we respond? Can we work with our friends at DOE to help maybe supplement the funds, look at some targeted investments and so forth. But that's an area that we're paying particular attention to in the project support category, because we're seeing a real growth in requests for funding for things that really kind of walk right on the edge as to whether or not this is curricular delivery in the classroom versus school corporation is good and totally the plan for the gym. So just wanted to give you guys just sort of think about one of the areas that we're keeping an eye on and thinking about for potential changes and adjustments in project support for the company. Yes.
Alrighty, so I'm gonna move into the grants approval. These are in your packets as well, and what's on the screen is just the applicants recommended for funding, and this is just an alpha order. Maybe. Okay. So here's first section. Again, these are all
Okay, in our packet.
in your packet. No easy way to get this out. This is A to something, I think it's bottom. Well, probably some more D's on the next slide.
Yep, Raw Inc. Crouch, so that's the next one.
And those ones highlighted in green are new. Here's the section. Any questions on our
I have a question. It's kind of for arts projects and arts organization. I'm just wondering, what does communication look like to those first time applicants who are not awarded? And then I see a lot of applicants that I'm sure have been maybe awarded at some point, but haven't been awarded this year or last year. So just looking at what communication looks
Yeah, absolutely, and I'll say maybe a few words and then Connie, you pick whatever I missed. When we do the decline notifications, one of the nice things about offering this twice is that people can come back again in the next cycle, which we'll notify people August 1 regarding project support, then we'll open again September 1. And so we'll encourage the new applicants to reach out to their regional arts partner, because for new applicants, they have access to a draft review of their application. And what we see a lot of times with a number of new applicants is they submit the day before and they're beyond the draft review deadline. So we'll be sure to encourage those new applicants that weren't funded to take advantage of the draft review and talking with their regional arts partners, maybe for that. They are getting that access. And then the other thing that we look for is in those more rural counties where there are non-funded applicants. We keep an eye on that and we can make some direct introductions and when she gets on board, to talk more specifically about some of the things that are going on there as well. And then there are, to your point, there are a number of people in this program that have been funded year over year, probably for many years in the project support program that are not funded this year, which is a really different set of circumstances. And so it is an unfortunate situation, but we'll direct them to the next opening as well. And for a lot of people, they wrote a good application. And so for a number of folks, it's not necessarily that they've got a bad project or there's a lot they need to improve about their application and sort of the realities of all the facts to work with. So there are certain situations like that, but that's sort of my, I did not miss anything.
No, I just add, that was great. I'll just add that we certainly keep the contact information for all applicants and we're sure to remind them and include them when announcements are made about future cycles. But also in the notification that Eric shared, we'll share information about our coming grant cycles, but also some of our partners who have project support funding so that they can potentially apply both again to us, then also to people or organizations like Arts Midwest, who has a project grant open right as we will be issuing notifications.
And I'll also note, everyone, AOS and APS will receive their reviewer comments. At the time of notification, they'll have a PDF document in their portal where they can see all the anonymized reviewer comments on their application, which is particularly important in project support this year because there was no time. So you couldn't tune in and hear people discussing it. So we've got all of that feedback aggregated and it'll be available for them, grouped by criteria. So they can see exactly how people work, what the reaction was there.
Thank you.
Eric, I have a question and maybe a comment or a request, but if I remember correctly from the start of your presentation on this section, all very clear, beautifully presented. Thank you very much. That we had about $800,000 allocated to this the previous fiscal year, and it's going to be closer to $600,000 this year. We're calling for awarding $437,000 or $438,000. Does that mean we anticipate having $160,000 or so for spring? Will there be a lot less awards in the second?
There could be, yeah, it's a smaller total amount available for that second cycle. And the thinking there was we had 200 plus applicants now, and wanted to do what we could with what we knew was in front of us. But it could be, if we get 250 applicants at this fall round, we might be coming to you with only 15 or 20% of those projects funded. That's a consequence of this.
Just sort of following on from Zizi's question about communication, how much of what you just said, for example, maybe without the specific details, are you forecasting for the community so they're prepared?
Yeah, that's a great.
To understand that.
Yeah.
It's getting tighter and tighter.
In the decline notification, we are referencing the reduction in funding from the General Assembly, so that people have a sense of the programs are more competitive this year. So we will be making sure people know that factual information about is the situation the agency is this much different than the past biennium where people are used to seeing closer to 70 or 80% of the project. Any other questions on the project?
Okay, we have before us the fiscal year 26 APS project support, spring cycle recommendations for funding. I will entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
If motion and second, please call the roll.
Absolutely, ZZ.
Aye.
Raina,
Aye.
Chad,
Aye.
Dave,
Aye.
Greg,
Aye.
Walter,
Aye.
Daniel,
Aye.
Lori,
Aye.
Jake,
Aye.
Anne,
Aye.
Scott.
Aye.
Thank you, motion carries. Now a traditional arts Indiana update.
Yeah, I'm gonna get that one second.
Oh.
Snuck in like 2 slides, but I just wanted to say a couple
Thank
things
you.
about where we're going. Sorry, Anne.
No, no.
About where we're going from here with AOS and APS, and just give you a sense of the macro level of what's been happening from sort of the combined look at these. These programs have been seeing a steady increase in demand year over year. The last time they were both open, we saw a 4% increase from FY 23 when we had this in FY 24-25. And now here at the 26 cycle, we're at 531 total applications between both programs, and we've got another cycle of large project support to go. So even with only half of the art project support pool in there, we're already at a 7% increase over the last time we did this. So I'm expecting by the time we talk in December, we'll be talking about what could be a 15-20% increase in total applications to these programs. And so we've got applications continuing to go up and budget continuing to go down. So there's a huge gap there. And so one of the things that the programs team is working on to respond to some of what would be a significant need in the funding space that we won't be able to necessarily meet in the way we have previously our services. What do those trainings look like? What do those programs look like? How do we provide technical assistance to people in other spaces and set up infrastructure for that sort of service delivery? Because that is something that we can do that is not grants, but we've got a lot of great expertise on staff and along our partner network to try to make sure we lead into that. And so I want to make sure we're planning for that over the coming years. And so you'll hear more about that as we get further into the fiscal year and set up some of that infrastructure. But I just wanted to give you sort of an overall picture of how these programs that are sort of at the core of our grant making have been trending. And in addition to the increase in demand, certainly a big reach, and they continue to reach more and more places, which is a testament to the relationship building that's been happening across all the departments of the agency. Gwendolyn was down in Beacon this yesterday evening attending a mural opening. So when we talk about this growth in applicants and in the county's reach, that's a testament to every person on staff's commitment to showing up for communities across Indiana. So we're going to continue doing that. And we're going to try to meet people where they are in the service space as well. And I think that's all I have. I might have had one more slide in here about coming attractions. So before I talk about TAI, I wanted to go back to the arts and health funding engineering at 250. Is it the slide after this?
Yeah, go back. There we go.
Coming attractions. Okay. So a couple of things that are coming down the pipe in the programs world. One is I mentioned some of those changes to the criteria and to the scoring and some of their evaluation processes. The next quarterly business meeting, we're going to break down what we saw from those evaluation processes, what changed from the previous ways we used to do those evaluation processes, and really impact how that's been going.
6 weeks.
And we'll certainly have a robust discussion on that. And then America 250 and arts and health programming. The America $250 are to support projects or activities related for the celebration of America 250. So the next QBM will be coming to you with a framework for what that will actually look like, what that program will actually look like. We're still working through some of the details, and we're still waiting on some additional clarification from the NEA on the rules and regulations for that program specifically from a content perspective. And then the arts and health programming, excited about this. This was actually competitive. This was not given to every state. We had to write a separate application for this. And we're awarded this grant based on the work we've done in creative aging across the state. And so this specific set of money will go back to supporting training and investment in creative aging across the state, sort of continuation of some of the things we've been doing in that space. So we're excited to get that rolling, and probably the next QBM or the one after will have some more detail on some of the different components of what that's going to be as well. And then last, but certainly not least, is next QBM, we'll be coming to you with a framework for creative convergence, which is the team-based, community-based program with in partnership with Ball State's Indiana Communities Institute, where they come together for a 2-day training and have an early action grant that implements some of the things that kind of training. We anticipate offering this twice this year again. So we'll be coming to you with a framework for that program for next QBM as well. Looking forward to that. I think that's it on upcoming attractions. I want to thank the commissioners for their work on the funding recommendations this year. We had a really robust discussion committee about a couple of ways to approach this, and really appreciate all of your questions and input and participation in the process. These were certainly some hard decisions, but I feel really confident about where we landed and why we landed in the places we did. So I appreciate everyone's work and the whole staff's work to get us into this point. So I'll do PAI here really quickly. For those of you who been around for a couple rounds of funding recommendations, or you've maybe seen Traditional Arts in Indiana in your funding packet as a grant agreement. Traditional Arts Indiana is our Folklife partner. As a piece of our National Endowment for the Arts award, we're required to do Folklife programming. And we partner with Traditional Arts Indiana out of Indiana University to provide that program across the state. They do things like apprenticeships and awards around folk and traditional artists in Indiana, and have been doing so for over 20 years. And so this partnership, we moved into professional services, so it doesn't show up as a grant for approval, but we are continuing with our support for Traditional Arts in Indiana, the $45,000 investment to continue that work. And so once Tom Kay, who runs that program, once we get some things stood up for the next fiscal year, he'll come in to talk about what some of those activities like in detail. And I'll just also circle back quickly to Poetry Out Loud. Again, that's also a required piece of our National Endowment for the Arts award. We receive money to do Poetry Out Loud, and this is another piece of our federal award. We work with an external partner to provide, and that is Indiana Community facilitates the work with all the high schools all over the state to get the students engaged in submitting their poetry recitations. And that is our poetry recitation program. And we'll do the state finals again. We'll do it in spring, March. And the finalists from Indiana will go on to the nationals. And I will note over the past 3 or 4 years, we've had some really phenomenal students go to nationals, and actually to 23, 24, 3. We had Shrupita actually won the national title. So we're continuing our work in Poetry Out Loud as well. And I think that is actually all for me. So I'm
Really quick question, actually, probably Jordan, you could answer this too, is where do things stand with the poet laureate? I've lost track.
Yeah, we renewed Curtis's, Curtis's contract to stay on as the Indiana State Poet Laureate. So he continues to do work across the state, hosting workshops and readings and other things.
Let me clarify real quick. So yeah, he's accepted to continue the second term. We're renewing that in the spring.
In the spring.
Yeah.
Oh,
so he's
just for the record.
Thank you. Thank you, Andre. So he's on board and is continuing to great work across the state. So that is continuing.
Great.
Any other?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jordan, giving us an update on artist services.
You could actually, then I think it's.
Yes.
So we just have a quick update on the happenings in artist services. Just as a reminder, we did complete the artist needs assessment back in 2023, 2024, where we held listening sessions with artists all across the state. And from those conversations, we assessed needs, and these are the program's responses. They kind of funneled into 2 different program suites, community building and business development. And so the work in progress exchange lab is the first project out of the community building suite. And so this program consists of monthly artist meetups across 5 areas of the state, north, south, east, west, and central. And so we are facilitating discussions around artists' creative process as well as their projects. Any projects that they are actively pursuing, are trying to get started, or reimagining. And so these are led by local arts leaders. And then because they have attended these labs, they have the opportunity to apply for funding to support their projects that they've been discussing from a range of $250 to $1,000. And so these are the regional lab leaders. When we last spoke in March, we had the Southwest and East lab facilitators secured. That was the New Harmony Project. Greencastle Arts Council, and Richmond Art Museum. And so within those regions, they're moving to 3 different areas, 2 to 3 different areas in that region. So South is meeting in New Harmony, we've met in Evansville, we've met in New Albany, and then we'll be meeting in. Hold on.
Newcastle?
Madison?
No.
Sorry.
So we'll be going to. And so the same thing is happening across the state. North and Central are now secure, and they started back in June. I attended the Central Lab last night in Whiteland at the Johnson County Public Library. 4 artists were there, and people brought their work. People got to discuss how they're kind of revisiting how they imagine abstract art, what their reference points are, and kind of some of the layering that they're doing in that work as well. That is led by Greenpeace Art Supply. AJ, who owns that art supply, is at the Studs. And so we kind of imagine this program into 2 and 3 different phases. One is what we observed in January through May, and then this new phase that we're currently in is implementing a new curriculum discussion guide that kind of is referenced from the Creative Act by Rick Rubin, who is a well-known music producer. And so the conversation also starts with values that have derived from the artist needs discussions to kind of level set and set the tone for the discussion and value everybody's opinion in place where they are in their careers. And so we've also got to train each of the leads on the 4 skills of competent artist facilitators, acting as a strategist, the educator, a facilitator, and a coach. And then the creative process, we're moving in and out of the 5 nonlinear phases, that being research, ideation, development, revision, and then affirming your work once it's completed. They're filling out registration prompts so that the leads know where they are in their creative process prior to the labs, and then they're also finishing the labs with creative exit tickets to kind of reflect on what they learned right in that discussion, but also go out into the world and kind of practice that with their creative work as well. So we did finish the spring cycle. We awarded 12 artists. I think we're at 11 now. But most of them were in Putnam County and Greencastle Art Council with that partnership there. Most was visual arts. We had a few crafts and music as well in Stafford. And then we had one in Muncie who's doing fabulous work with iron molds for sewer filters, which is really interesting, kind of that public art in a functional way. And then somebody in Putnam County is also making those silver glasses I kind of teach you about in March. She's making silver glasses out of a family heirloom platter. And so the fund that they requested is kind of to help them support the completion of those. So the Creative Leap. The Creative Leap is the first pilot out of our business development suite of programs. It is kind of a natural next step from OnRamp, our Creative Entrepreneur Accelerator, 3-day workshop to kind of help emerging artists with business acumen. But this is kind of an application of that said business acumen, which is also led by Dr. Elaine Grogan-Luttrell of Minerva Financial Arts. Applications opened back in May. We closed them in June. And so the process focused on how strong the core of those emerging businesses were, or established businesses were, any emerging opportunities that they want to set goals in both the financial and cash flow areas, as well as marketing areas, and then long-term goals, whether it be personal or professional for the artist. And so we have literally, today was the deadline for people to accept their invitation. We accepted 12 artists. Well, it's a lucky number, I guess. 12 artists as well, ranging from around the state. And so the first workshop will be held on July 28th. They'll get some instructions next week on how to connect via Zoom those workshops. Any questions on creative? Okay. And so lastly, OnRamp. So OnRamp is our long-standing program, OnRamp Creative Entrepreneur Accelerator, where we were accepting up to 30 artists across the state to kind of establish themselves as creative entrepreneurs. They were, established in their creative practice, but were kind of really emerging as business owners. And so they attended a 3-day immersive workshop, then also applied for the $2,000 for a fellowship grant to kind of apply those lessons to a year-long project. And so currently it is on hold. Our 2024 cohort is still in their fellowship project, but we did not accept the cohort this year for sake of an evaluation, longitudinally across the program itself. We started back in 2018, we had a total of 6 main cohorts, and then in 2021, we had 5 additional local cohorts across the state. We're working with measurement resources on that evaluation and research. We sent out a survey to all of those participants, all the alumni of the program. And at the time we spoke to the program grants and services, we had received 109 responses. And we were complimented on how well we were doing with the response rate, especially when you don't talk to those artists on a regular basis. And so the survey closed on July 10th, and we will be talking with measurement resources next week on the analyzation of what has been collected in that survey. I will backtrack and say that we did send them all of the data that we had on this artist, and they are typically the cohort. We assess where they are on acceptance into the cohort. We do a survey after the 3-day workshop, and we also do a survey once their fellowship is complete. But they have all of that as kind of a starting point to kind of assess where they are now from that information. So we're assessing things like how much money have you made? We want to know, has this been fruitful to your practice? What connections have you made outside of artists? Have you made connections locally with your chamber and kind of entities of that nature? But we're excited to see where we have landed. We're going to do an impact report to kind of bring people into the fold, to kind of foster more partnership. And we're also looking for an iteration to kind of go back to that local model, kind of spread the love, those cohorts. So we're excited to learn more and see where we're going with that. No, thank you. That's it for me. Any questions on ORAMP or any artist services programs?
Great work.
I actually was curious about one thing, Jordan, in that process, the 5-step process you described. Can you talk about the affirming step?
Yeah, so I think when people, it kind of ended naturally a revision, revising your work. But what does it look like to revise your work and then affirm your work? I think a lot of artists are kind of in a space where, okay, I did it, now what? How do I sell it? How do I present it? How do I exhibit it? How do I share it with the world? And so this program for me is more so focused on making good work, because you can't have a sustainable business if the work is done. So we want to make sure it's good work.
Okay, thank you. Next up, our Regional Arts Partnership Update. Kayla.
Yes, thank you. I'll be real brief. So, partners, we are in the process of reviewing FY25 APS and AOS final grant reports, following the recent report deadlines this past week. So, making our way through those. We're very grateful for the transparency and communication from the IAC staff throughout the last several weeks with the delays in funding notification. It's been nice to have the group of partners come together with the IAC leading us and being transparent and encouraging throughout the whole process. So thank you for that. And so although there are some great projects and organizations not receiving funding, as Eric outlined earlier, we're looking forward to seeing many amazing projects receive funding, as well as arts organizations receiving notification in the coming weeks. And again, we have the additional APS cycle to look forward to. So thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, next up, we do not have any consent agenda items moved to the full agenda. So is there any old business or new business to come before commission?
So we have new business. First, we have 2 commissioners whose terms technically expire in June, although I'll remind them again in this public meeting, they serve until replaced. But I wanted to always take a moment. We don't know necessarily, we'll have Ann and Lori with us at our September quarterly business meeting to recognize them for their time. They have both served 8 years as commissioners, and to have survived on the commission for 8 years is a notable roller coaster. Yeah, 8 years. But we wanted to take a moment to thank them for their service as commissioners in this meeting. And we have a couple of parting gifts to share. No, again, remind me that you serve until the place. We can't open this until we get that. Until we tell you. And I want to take a point of personal privilege to say it's been such a joy to have both of you as commissioners. You have been phenomenal, both of you. Laura, you have served and chaired the Programs, Grants and Services Committee for many years, too many to even remember now, and you've been phenomenal. As a chair of that committee, pushing us in really good ways, asking really great questions of us.
Making
and
tough decisions.
Making tough decisions, as we certainly have seen recently. In fact, I would just reflect back on our most recent Programs, Grants and Services Committee meeting where we had probably one of the most substantive discussions about hard things that we have done as a commission, certainly since I've been executive director. So I really thank Lori for her leadership and making space for those sorts of conversations. And then Anne, of course, been our chair for the last 2 years. It's been phenomenal to work with her. We also have a lovely chair parting gift here because assuming that the vote goes for the officers and Anne will go on. That's our next item here. So don't, you can get it by I would also say that it's been a year. We're only in July. This year, it has been phenomenal to work with Anne. She's been a phenomenal chair. Have relied so much on her counsel and wisdom. Not just for me, but the entire staff, and it's been just so responsive and helpful and just could not say enough. We just could not have made it over the last. Without you, Anne, so. You're gonna make it, sure. Said I'm gonna do it. Just so grateful for your leadership as chair. Just been. I remember the first meeting, you were still very nervous and wrote everything down and look at you, were just flying out. Again, thank you so much. It's been, again, such a joy. One more presentation before we move on to our officer election. So I'm going to hand it over to Andre to handle that.
Thank you. Also want to recognize our colleague Stephanie Fendler for her 10 years of service. Thank you for all of us and all of you commissioners too during her time as the executive assistant for the ISC and now our financial operations manager. That Stephanie's that backbone of this agency, just with everything that she's been able to do and support all of us. So we're really grateful for you and thank you for so much.
This is not a parting gift. It takes a lot to be in state service for 10 years. But now she's vested, so she might.
Yeah.
I know.
Congratulations on the pension.
Big thing.
Can I just say quickly that it has been an absolute joy to work with all of you, truly. And I had to sort of remember, Stephanie, you really were the first face I remember back. My first meeting, I think it was at the State Museum and walking in, not knowing where I was, what I was doing, and you greeted me and got me oriented, and then see the staff who have come on since then and just taken the commission to new heights, and the leadership has been extraordinary, really extraordinary, learning greatly. And especially this last year has been particularly challenging, but it's kind of the way things go sometimes, and we'll just hope keep the optimism going. Yeah.
Lori, we've been through 2 executive directors and COVID and budget challenges. It's been quite the time.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Okay, any other new or old business before we get to our election? Thank you. I'll cry if I talk anything. We have officers up for approval for fiscal year 26.
Yes, there's a memo in the back.
Yeah. Yeah. Where's my, yeah.
Austin, could you present the slate, actually? Could you verbally present the slate? Madam Chair, the slate will be presented verbally.
I can present the slate. We have Dave Tice recommended for chair. Brandon Bradley recommended for vice chair. And Scott Wiley recommended for secretary.
I don't know about that. When's my term?
Okay, we have before us a slate of officers. Does anyone have any additional offer nominations to bring before group? All
I
right,
move to close nominations.
do we have a motion to approve the slate before us?
So move. Second.
We have a motion and a second, please call the roll.
Azizi.
Aye.
Raina.
Aye.
Chad. Aye. Dave. Aye. Greg.
Aye.
Walter.
Aye.
Daniel.
Aye.
Lori.
Aye.
Jake.
Aye.
Anne.
Aye.
Scott.
Carries, I'll pass the gavel.
Thanks for the gap. Before we adjourn, I want to have just last great comments about Ann. Ann has been a phenomenal chair. And through a tough time, plus having several responsibilities beyond the Indiana Arts. The balance as well, so thank you for that. Yeah, so my act is to adjourn.
Yeah, get us out.
Do we have to go through the normal formality or is the chair just?
We can just adjourn through.
It's a new. With the, yeah.
That's right.
We are adjourned.
Thank you all.
Thanks for that.